Hey there, I'm Mr. Edwards again, and today we're going to talk about human history. Now, I know you're thinking, what? This is science, right? Why are we talking about history? It's because human history has a lot to do with earth and environmental science, and it definitely has a lot to do with understanding some of the big issues that we're here to discuss in this course. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, the earth has been around for a long time, about 4.6 billion years according to geologists and physicists' best calculations today, but it hasn't looked the way it looks today for that entire time. In fact, scientists think that it took about 1 billion years before even the first simplest form of life was able to develop and survive on the planet. The story of life on Earth is complicated, and we're definitely still learning a lot through research and study about how the Earth has changed over its long history. But recently, scientists have become much more interested in Earth's recent history, the part of Earth's story that includes us, humans, because there are some important and worrying changes that we see happening in our planet today. You see, the data that scientists keep track of from all around the planet are showing that Earth is changing faster than it ever has before in its billions of years of history. So we're asking, well, why is that happening? What's the cause of all these changes, and how are they going to impact us in the future? In order to understand where these changes might take us in the future, we need to first think about where they came from. And that answer is a lot closer to home than a lot of people would like to think. The thing is, when you think about how old our planet is, humans haven't been around that long. We're pretty sure that our species has been around for a little more than about 5 million years. Now, that sounds like a long time to you and me, but when you compare it to an entire planet and giant natural systems that have been working on Earth for thousands of millions of years, a few million years is pretty young. Now, when humans first showed up on our planet, the world didn't look like it does today. There were no buildings or cities or grocery stores. We had to survive out in the wild, in small packs or groups, like a lot of animals, especially predators, survive in the wild today. We were what we call hunter-gatherers. That means we teamed up with other humans and we moved from place to place looking for natural shelters like forests or caves, and we ate what we could find in the land around us. Plants, fruits, bugs, and as we learned to use the natural resources around us, we made stone tools that helped us hunt for larger animals and even protect ourselves against larger threats out in the wild. This was our life for millions of years, humans surviving off the natural resources of the environment, in balance with all the natural systems of Earth. But humans are a different kind of species. We started to learn and discover how to control our environment around us by building sophisticated shelters and to even take plants from one place and grow them in a new place. We even learned how to grow animals for our own purposes rather than always going out into the wild and hunting. This is what we now call agriculture or farming. And it completely changed the way humans survived about 10,000 years ago. You see, now that we could grow our own food right where we were, and we could use the animals we grew ourselves to help us manage the land and as a steady source of food as well, we didn't have to hunt and gather anymore. Instead of migrating or moving from place to place based on the seasons or the food we could find, now we could stay in one place. We learned to control the land, to control our environment, and make it work for us rather than constantly having to adapt to the natural environment around us. So we built communities or villages. We built a whole new version of life based on settling down in one place, farming, and using the land to our benefit. See, these villages turned into towns, and then cities, and then entire civilizations all over the world. Those ancient civilizations continued to learn about the world around us. Science and math and philosophy and government and economics, they were all invented. And as people from different civilizations traveled and found each other, they shared ideas and inventions and materials and products, all created from the natural resources around them, and their increasing understanding of how to control their environment. Medicine, technology, transportation, even money. It all came from humans' interest in learning more and understanding more about the world around them. Those civilizations became modern nations and empires, and that eventually led to conflicts like war and slavery and poverty and racism. Because humans aren't perfect no matter how much we know and learn. As history moved on, so did technology. We invented new things to make life more productive, new medicines so we could treat diseases and live longer, new products that we could make and buy to make our lives more comfortable. In the mid-1800s, the steam engine was invented, which led to a worldwide change in how we created those products. We called that big change the Industrial Revolution. We built factories and put people to work. We burned coal in order to run those machines that did the hardest work for us. In fact, those machines did way more work than humans ever could do. This created huge amounts of opportunity and wealth, and also inequity. But the world would never be the same. Soon, trains and steam-powered ships came to carry people and products all over the world. Then eventually cars and even airplanes, all relying on the burning of coal and oil to produce cheap, easy energy to fuel the modern global economy. By the end of the 1900s, computers again had changed everything. And now we carry cell phones in our pockets that have more computing power than all the first computers in the world combined. The internet is where we go today for information and communication and to buy everyday products and even for school. But those technology advances and medicine and transportation and the production of products that we could buy and sell, it all came with a price that we didn't see or understand at the time. It turns out that all that cheap, easy energy that we got from burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas wasn't as clean as it seemed. Once we burned it, the gases produced stayed in the Earth's atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. That's that CO2 you see written on the screen right there. Now, carbon dioxide, CO2, it's a natural thing, and it has always been an important part of Earth's atmosphere and natural systems. But over the past 200 years of burning all that coal and oil and releasing all that extra carbon into the atmosphere, the amount of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere has reached higher and higher levels than at any time in human history. And at the same time, we see the average air and ocean temperatures all over the planet have also been increasing. In fact, 16 of the 17 hottest years on record in human history have happened since the year 2000. And this year is on schedule to be added to that list. So if humans had been burning more and more fossil fuels, which we know release carbon into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere has been building up more and more carbon dioxide, which we know is really good at trapping heat energy, and the average temperature of our planet has been increasing almost every single year, what does that tell us about humans' impact and responsibility for the changes that we are seeing all over our planet? It tells us that things are only going to get worse unless humans make some important changes. And scientists aren't convinced that we are moving fast enough to make, as a global community, to make those necessary changes. So scientists have suggested that we change the way we think about our planet and our planet's history as a result. The Anthropocene, or if you're British, you call it the Anthropocene. Either pronunciation is fine. But the Anthropocene is the name that some scientists are giving to this current time period in Earth's history. They recognize that humans have had a clear, unmistakable impact on our planet's systems and natural resources, more so than any other species in our planet's history. And because of that, we need to name and identify this time period for the humans that are at the center of all these changes. So anthropo, which means humans, kind of like the word anthrosphere, we've talked about that word before, and scene, which means a geologic period of time in Earth's history. So Anthropocene is the term. What are these major human impacts that we should recognize in order to better understand what is happening on our planet today? Well, there are many, many specific ways that humans are changing and affecting Earth's natural systems. We're changing the land to build more roads and buildings. We're removing nutrients and minerals from the soils. We are throwing millions and millions of pounds of trash and plastic into landfills, too much of which ends up in rivers and oceans. There are honestly too many of these negative impacts to name, but we can try to summarize them into three main categories. The first of these is the depletion of natural resources. Depletion means that we are using up or wearing down the resources that we have so that there is very little remaining in Earth's natural systems. Humans have gotten so good at mining and extracting our planet's natural resources that we have depleted many of the minerals and materials that we have relied on in order to build the modern world around us. In fact, we've had such an impact on how much of our planet's natural resources are left that even the renewable natural resources like clean water and air are starting to become a concern for different communities around the globe. The second major environmental impact that marks the Anthropocene is the loss of biodiversity and the degradation of natural ecosystems. Degradation is a word similar to depletion, but when something is degraded, its quality is worn down so that it becomes less useful, or it doesn't work as well as it did before. Often in the process of going out into the Earth's environments and harvesting the natural resources there, humans end up having long-term negative impacts on the survival of those ecosystems, so much so that they are permanently damaged. This is degradation, making the resources less valuable and useful just by overusing and depleting them. But on top of degradation, the living species that survive in these different ecosystems are also suffering. Due to loss of habitat, overhunting or poaching, or just simply not being able to survive in a degraded ecosystem, a lot of vulnerable animal and plant species are being driven closer and closer to extinction. In fact, scientists believe that more than 500 different species have already gone extinct directly due to human impacts. And another 1 million species of plants and animals are currently at risk or close to extinction for the same reasons. We call this loss of different species biodiversity loss. Now, let's talk about biodiversity for just a second. Biodiversity is all the different types of living things: plants, animals, insects, birds, fish, fungi, bacteria, all the different living things that live and interact in an ecosystem. Ecosystems need a lot of different kinds of living things, a lot of biodiversity in order to be healthy. So when ecosystems break down due to depletion of natural resources or destruction from other human activities, and they lose entire species, they lose their biodiversity. Or when humans clear an entire ecosystem in order to use the natural resources there and replace the many different plants and animals with just one type of species, that also shows a loss of diversity. So we call it biodiversity loss. There are two images here that represent the most biodiverse ecosystems on our planet: coral reefs and tropical rainforests. They are home to more different kinds of living species than any other type of environment on our planet. You can see all the different colors in the coral reef and all the different shapes and shades of green in the rainforest, lots of biodiversity. However, due to human impacts, both of these types of environments are at risk. Here's what they look like after losing their biodiversity. The coral reefs have lost their color and variety of fish and ocean creatures that used to survive there, and the rainforest, which used to be full of thousands of different kinds of plants and bugs and animals, have now been replaced by the same type of tree over and over again. These are actually eucalyptus trees, which don't even naturally grow in these rainforests, but they have been replanted here to replace the other trees that were cut down, because these trees grow faster and they can more often be cut down and turned into lumber that we use to make cheap furniture. The third category of human impacts that we need to know about in order to understand what we mean when we say the Anthropocene is global climate change. We used to refer to this as global warming back in the 1980s and 1990s, but since then we've learned a lot about the changes that are happening in the Earth's global climate system, and scientists realized that warming is probably misleading to a lot of people. So they instead started using the term change so that people would hopefully start to understand that there were all sorts of new patterns in the climate all around the planet, and those changes wouldn't look the same in all places. So climate change refers to, yes, the overall increase in average ocean and atmospheric temperatures around the planet, but it also refers to the changes in air and ocean currents that come with that. Well, that leads to changes in rainfall in different regions of the planet. So that causes monsoons in some parts of the world, but then in others causes droughts and even wildfires. Climate change leads to more frequent, more intense major storms like hurricanes, but it also includes stronger snowstorms in the winter. These weird changes that scientists and climatologists have been tracking over the past 50 years or so have led to the conclusion that our planet's global systems have already started to shift and change in order to adapt to the impacts of humans. So, the Anthropocene sounds pretty scary, but it doesn't have to be, because the story doesn't stop here. We get to decide, you get to decide what our response to these issues will be. These major environmental impacts and changes, I often call them issues, are already happening, and they'll continue as long as humans don't change their actions. Some of these problems are already so far gone that it will be very difficult to try to fix the negative impacts they've already had. But it doesn't mean we can't try in order to avoid further problems in Earth's natural systems. The answer is us. The answer is to think more globally. The answer is to think more sustainably and to think more about the future. We can each make an impact, even if we start small and really close to home. Imagine if the entire world took on something small in their own local community. Imagine how gigantic that impact would be. Something to keep thinking about.